Today we are traveling back in time, meaning I will show you a model that I have made several years ago, and I actually wanted to make this one for as long as I can remember. And I'm actually glad that I haven't built it way back when, because it stretched my ability and I'm sure that the results wouldn't have been as good as they are. This is now one of my favorite models and, in my opinion, one of the best ones I made so far. Don't worry, we'll come back to my current build in the next video, but right now let me tell you about the Dornier 22. This elegant, if relatively unknown design from the mid-30s was flown by 3 countries: Finland, Greece and Kingdom of Yugoslavia. The history of the Yugoslav Dorniers is extremely interesting and unique. I could go on for a long time, but for this video I'll try to compress it to only a few sentences. After the invasion of Yugoslavia by Nazi Germany in April of 1941, the king and the government went into exile and the army was left in disarray. Soon it splintered and was assimilated by many nationalist and communist guerrillas all around the country. The prospect of the surviving men of the Royal Yugoslav Air Force didn't look too good. Devoid of high command or any clear directive, it was time for the initiative to save lives and the equipment. And this is exactly what the crews of Dorniers did. Using the advantage of the sea, Yugoslav Dorniers embarked on a 2,000-kilometer journey across the Mediterranean. Taking short refuge on 2 Greek islands of Corfu and Creta, they went on and reached Abu Qir in Egypt, where they found new home and a chance to fight again. They joined the units of RAF that were stationed in North Africa, and indeed they fought for another year, flying reconnaissance and anti-submarine missions. Despite their valiant efforts and the secret ambition of the crews to make another dash to the Black Sea and join Red Army there, this did not happen. The lack of spare parts, complicated by the fact that the plane was designed in metric and the RAF maintenance operated in imperial units, as well as some political decisions made by the government in exile in London, forced the scrapping of these planes. None of them survived the war. So I tried to revive the ghost and put it back on the waves of the Mediterranean where it belongs. Let's see how I did it. Armed with 1:48 scale planet models, full resin kit of this plane, an excellent book by Georgian Nikolic on this topic, and a lot of patience, I went to work. This is an old school resin kit of a complex subject with soft details and some misalignments. It is also a big kit in this scale that will command significant presence when built. The wing comes as a solid single-piece casting and it is surprisingly straight and free of any imperfections. But it is heavy, and all this weight will be supported by struts that in the kit have no pins or positive alignment with the airframe. The floats came in halves and these were very warped in my kit. So the first task after freeing them from the casting blocks was to use hot air from a hairdryer and then cold water to straighten them. I also drilled position holes along the mating surfaces and made alignment pins from steel wire. Quick 2-component epoxy was used to bond the halves together. In the subsequent sanding and filling, all surface details were lost, so the new ones had to be created using excellent scale drawings from the book. The supports for the floats are made from very soft white metal and the parts came already bent and broken, so I kept only the vertical struts and I sanded and drilled position holes in them for connecting elements, and then replaced the horizontal brace with the brass rod. Note that I won't be able to dry fit this airframe as a whole almost to the very end, so very precise measurements and adjustment of subcomponents is critical. After a coat of grey primer, I applied resin wet transfers for the numerous inspection hatches seen on the floats. The cherry on top, so to speak, was this rope tying ring made from copper wire. Another layer of primer unified all the textures and prepared the parts for final painting further down the road. And then it was time to make some waves. I started with some plasticine clay to sculpt the ever-changing face of the sea. I used different tools to stamp irregular small waves onto the surface. Satisfied with the look, I carefully measured the right position for the floats and used the prepared assemblies to press them into the plasticine. Afterwards, I've made the wake of the moving aircraft using images of real hydroplanes taking off. Let's play with my 40-year-old Lego blocks next. I've constructed the casting walls, sealed them with some kitchen wrap, carefully removed the floats, and poured liquid silicone to make the negative mold of this small slice of Mediterranean Sea. Last and most nerve-wracking step in this process was to mix and pour transparent resin with a drop of turquoise blue and then go away for 24 hours to wait for everything to cure. After removing the hardened slab of resin from the mold, I was heartbroken. The surface looked dull and lifeless. Filled with little air bubbles, this looked nothing like I imagined. I was already considering an alternative base where my Dornier is beached on the sands of North Africa when an idea came to me. As a last-ditch effort, I covered the surface with that magic floor polish called Future. As I was brushing it on, the sea came alive. The play of light and shadow from the depths, the saturated colors, all was there. And even the air bubbles disappeared from the view, with the ones remaining looking like the natural occurrence in the moving water. The transformation was amazing. Using few products from the AK range, I created foamy crests of the waves, and the Mediterranean Sea was finished. All of a sudden, the remaining part of this project did not look like Mission Impossible anymore. Still, a lot of work to be done and a lot of resin dust to be collected. The fuselage halves create a mating surface that runs across the cockpit openings for the 3 crew members. I decided to cut this section off so that I can work on it separately and also have free access to cockpit details even after joining 2 halves together. In a similar way, the cuts were made around the engine cowling. I wanted to refine and detail this section, and to do this effectively, it had to be a separate assembly. Big oil cooler at the bottom, as well as the central air inlet on the top of the cowling, needed a lot of attention. The exhaust ports were also very soft, so I decided to improve them. A lot of sanding and filling was needed to smooth out the surface, and I replaced the heat exchanger with my own homemade unit. Watch my MiG-3 build video if you'd like to learn how to do this. The link is in the description below. Panel lines and rows of rivets were added at the end, and I applied a dark wash to be able to better see if everything looks as intended. The inner structure of the cockpit sidewalls was deleted and replaced with some evergreen stock. The upper deck of the cockpit section that I removed earlier is now refined and dry fitted to make sure there are no gaps or steps in the final assembly. Some details from the kit will be used in the cockpit, but there will be a lot of scratch building as well. This oxygen regulator, for example. 3 of these units are given for each crew member, but the pilot's and radio operator's position will be barely visible, so I detailed only the one for the rear gunner that will be open to view. I made some interlocking supports to make sure that the finished engine cowling will snap tight with the rest of the fuselage for that premium kit feel a boy can dream. The spinner received a steel shaft with brass sleeve to enable effortless rotation without wobble for those glamour photos. Here's the fuselage assembled together. Photographic gear is installed behind the ventral opening, and the lower defense gun position blocked off as it was not present on the Yugoslav Dornier 22. The rear flap will block most of the view, but I installed the kit photo-etched piece as the back end of the oil radiator, just in case. Exhaust pipes were made from brass tubing, but since these were elliptical in shape, I positioned them carefully in the clamp of the PE bending tool and squeezed until the desired shape is achieved. Cockpit detailing was finished at this point, so I could sit back and feel some instant gratification by looking at my hard work. All it was missing were the brave airmen. Speaking of them, the crew of 3 you saw already was sorted from the 1:48 scale Swordfish kit by Tamiya. I just replaced the face of the rear gunner with the one from the ICM's set of Soviet figures. Now, I am no figure painter, but for the purpose of populating my Dornier, I think these look quite decent. And here they are already strapped in and waiting for the takeoff. The gunner is always late. And now for the most tedious part of this build, the struts, interconnecting the floats with the fuselage and the wing. This was mind-numbing and repetitive work, as all elements needed to be carefully measured, trimmed, and dry-fitted many times, so that the final assembly had proper geometry from all angles. Some supports were too long, few were too short. All had to be drilled through and reinforced with steel wire. Some had to be completely replaced. You don't want to know how many times I tried to hold everything together to see if it fits, just so it could slip through my fingers, collapse, and crash in a heap of resin bits. But in the end, my patience was rewarded with this graceful shape holding its own, so I could move on. On the left is the kit part, and on the right the replacement for the pilot's windshield I made from a piece of cylindrical acetate tube where some spare blades were stored. The kit part was simply too small. Kinematic links between elevators and their aerodynamic balances were very simplified in the kit, so I rebuilt them from steel wire and some spare photo-etched bits. Bomb racks and anti-submarine ordnance were out of the RAF stock and therefore sourced from the same Swordfish kit that the crew came from. I replaced the tail cylinders for the bombs with plastic I found in my scrap box. Antenna mast was also drilled through to be reinforced with steel wire. Orifices for the propeller blades were made in the spinner, and small loop anchors for the rigging created from copper wire. I attached steel pins to aileron counterbalances to anchor them into the holes I drilled before at the appropriate spots on the wing. After a coat of black primer, I repaired some minor imperfections by sanding, and then it was finally time to paint this seabird. The overall light grey coat was applied in thin layers through irregular spraying masks. Subsequent layers finished the application of paint, but left spotty appearance of the machine worn by the sun and salt. Kit decals adhered really well to the surface. Some cracks appeared due to their age, but were easy to repair with some paint. The Yugoslav national flag of red, white and blue was masked and airbrushed on the rudder. After attaching horizontal tail, some minor repair was needed. I carefully glued metal exhaust pipes one by one, and then weathered the whole fuselage with some soot and stains from the engine and general wear that one expects on the operational aircraft at war. Payload was also painted, weathered and attached. And the rear gunner finally joined the crew. Improvised patches of green color on the wing and floats were to be applied with a brush. This camouflage is unique to the Dornier with the number 309, and it was applied at some point during its journey across the Mediterranean Sea. The pattern on the floats can be seen on some photos, but the top of the wing, while definitely having these patches applied, is mostly speculative. Using chipping fluid and then some winter grime by AK, I created waterline marks alongside the floats. Finally, I created the frame for my water base, cutting the profiled wooden beam from the hardware store and staining it with a rich mahogany tone. As mentioned in the beginning, working on this model was not easy, and I had to make several leaps of faith to come to its conclusion, but I couldn't be happier with its final result. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. If you did, please like, comment and subscribe. You can also consider sending this video to someone that might like it too. Until the next one, peace and love.